The discharge papers were already signed. Their belongings were packed, the hospital room was ready to be cleared, and everyone believed your soulmate would finally walk through those doors and go home. But when the nurse came in and told them it was time to leave, your soulmate looked directly at their mother and said something nobody in that room expected: "I'm not leaving until you make me one promise about them." The room went completely silent, because everyone knew exactly who they meant. They meant you. Listen carefully, because what happened inside that hospital room was not a small emotional moment. Your soulmate had spent days lying awake with memories they had tried desperately to bury. Being inside that hospital had stripped away all the distractions, all the family pressure, and every excuse they had used to avoid confronting what happened between you. And somewhere between those long nights and quiet mornings, one truth became impossible for them to ignore. They could leave the hospital, but they could no longer keep running from what they still felt for you. Their mother tried to change the subject. She picked up the discharge papers and quietly said, "We can discuss this when we get home." But your soulmate didn't move. They remained sitting on the edge of that hospital bed, staring at her with an expression she had not seen in years. "No," they answered. "Every time we say later, nothing happens. This time I need your word before I walk out of here." Their mother froze because she suddenly realized this was not another temporary burst of emotion. Your soulmate had already made a decision. Then your name was spoken aloud. After all that time, after everything the family had tried to put behind them, your name filled that hospital room again. Their mother lowered her eyes immediately. Your soulmate noticed. "Why do you always look away when I mention them?" they asked. "What happened that nobody ever told me?" That question changed everything, because their mother had been carrying an answer your soulmate had never been allowed to hear. Don't skip what happened next, because this was the moment the conversation stopped being about an old relationship and became about a hidden truth. Your soulmate reached for their mother's hand and said, "I don't care what happened years ago. I don't care who disagrees with me. I need you to promise that if you know anything about them, anything at all, you will stop hiding it from me." Their mother's eyes immediately filled with tears. But that still wasn't the promise your soulmate was waiting for. They took a slow breath and finally said exactly what they wanted: "Promise me that you will help me find them. And if I get one chance to speak to them again, promise me you won't stand between us this time." Their mother couldn't answer. Seconds passed. Then nearly a full minute. Your soulmate remained completely still, refusing to reach for their bag or take another step toward the door. Even the nurse sensed that something much deeper was happening and quietly stepped outside, leaving mother and child alone with a truth that had waited far too long to surface. Finally, their mother sat beside them. Her hands were trembling. "There is something you need to know before I make that promise," she whispered. Your soulmate's expression changed instantly. Because their mother wasn't about to tell them that she didn't know where you were. She was about to confess that she knew far more about what happened to you than your soulmate had ever imagined, and the promise they were demanding from her was connected to a decision she had secretly made years ago. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something your soulmate had never seen before. An envelope. And written across the front of it was your name. For several seconds, your soulmate simply stared at that envelope. They didn't reach for it. They didn't ask another question. They just looked at your name written across the front as if the entire hospital room had suddenly disappeared around them. Their mother held it tightly between trembling fingers, and that alone told your soulmate this was not something she had received yesterday. The edges were worn. One corner had been folded and unfolded many times. Whatever was inside had been carried, hidden, and protected for far longer than anyone wanted to admit. Finally, your soulmate looked up and asked, "How long have you had this?" Their mother tried to answer, but her voice failed her. That hesitation was enough. Your soulmate's face changed. "How long?" they asked again. This time their mother whispered, "Years." That single word hurt more than anything your soulmate had expected to hear. Years meant she had known something while your soulmate was searching for answers. Years meant that every time your name had been mentioned and the family had gone quiet, there had been a reason. Years meant your soulmate had spent countless nights wondering whether you had simply stopped caring while an envelope carrying your name had been sitting somewhere within reach. They slowly took it from their mother, but before opening it they asked the question she feared most. "Did they give this to you?" Their mother lowered her head. "Not exactly." Your soulmate stared at her. "Then who did?" She closed her eyes for a moment and admitted that someone connected to what happened between you had delivered it long ago with very specific instructions. The envelope was supposed to reach your soulmate only when the family was finally ready to tell the complete truth. Your soulmate almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ready?" they said quietly. "Who decided when I was ready to know the truth about my own life?" Their mother had no answer. Your soulmate looked toward the hospital window, fighting the emotion rising in their chest. Being inside that room had already forced them to think about how quickly life could change, but now they were realizing something even harder. Part of their past might have been shaped by decisions made without their knowledge. They turned back toward their mother and said, "This is why I'm not leaving. I knew there was something you weren't telling me." Their mother reached for them, but your soulmate pulled their hand away. "No more protecting me with silence. No more deciding what I should know. If this has anything to do with you and me, I want everything." Their mother nodded through tears. She told your soulmate to open the envelope, but warned them that once they read what was inside, they might never look at the separation the same way again. Your soulmate slid one finger beneath the sealed edge and slowly opened it. Inside was not a long letter. There were only a few pages and one small folded note. The first page contained dates your soulmate immediately recognized. One was the day everything between you began falling apart. Another was the day your soulmate had tried to contact you and received no answer. And beside those dates were details they had never known. Your soulmate read the first few lines twice, then looked sharply at their mother. This can't be true. Their mother began crying before they even finished the page. According to what was written there, you had not disappeared from their life as easily as everyone had allowed them to believe. There had been an attempt to reach them. There had been a message that never arrived. There had even been a moment when you were much closer to reconnecting than your soulmate ever knew. But someone had intervened because they believed keeping the two of you apart would prevent an even bigger family conflict. Your soulmate's hands began shaking. All those years, they had carried one painful belief, that when things became difficult, you had chosen to walk away. Now that belief was beginning to collapse in front of them. Don't skip this moment, because your soulmate did something their mother wasn't prepared for. They stopped reading and placed the papers beside them. Then they looked directly into her eyes and asked, "Were you part of this?" Their mother immediately shook her head, but your soulmate noticed something in her expression. "Maybe you didn't start it," they said, "but you knew." That was the difference. Their mother finally admitted that she had learned pieces of the truth later, and instead of telling your soulmate immediately, she remained silent because she believed too much time had already passed. She thought revealing everything would reopen wounds that had finally started to close. But they never closed, your soulmate whispered. You just stopped seeing them. That sentence broke their mother. She covered her face and began sobbing. Your soulmate didn't raise their voice. They didn't need to. The disappointment in their expression said enough. After a long silence, their mother admitted something else. She said she had watched your soulmate compare every new relationship to what they once had with you. She had watched them pretend certain dates meant nothing. She had watched their expression change whenever someone accidentally mentioned your name. And somewhere deep inside, she had always known the story between you had never truly ended. It had simply been interrupted. Your soulmate picked up the folded note from inside the envelope. Unlike the other pages, this one had only a few handwritten lines. They unfolded it carefully, and the moment they recognized the handwriting, their breath caught. Their mother saw their reaction and whispered, "Yes." Your soulmate didn't need confirmation. They knew whose handwriting it was. It was yours. The note wasn't filled with accusations. It wasn't begging them to come back. Instead, it contained something far more painful, an explanation that you never wanted them to believe you had abandoned what the two of you shared. You had apparently wanted one thing preserved above everything else, the truth. Even if you and your soulmate never found your way back to each other, you didn't want them living with a false version of why everything ended. Your soulmate pressed the note against their chest and closed their eyes. Suddenly the promise they had demanded from their mother became even more important. They looked at her and said, "Now you understand why I can't walk out of this hospital pretending I didn't see this." Their mother nodded. "Tell me what you want me to do," she whispered. Your soulmate answered immediately. "First, tell me everything you know. Then help me find them. And when we do, I need you to promise me that nobody in this family will interfere again." Their mother stared at them for a long moment. Then she reached forward, took their hand, and finally said the words your soulmate had been waiting to hear. "I promise." Only then did your soulmate reach for their belongings. But just as they stood to leave the hospital room, their mother stopped them. "There's one more thing," she said. Your soulmate turned around. Their mother looked toward the envelope and whispered, "You think that note is the last thing they left behind? It isn't." Your soulmate froze. Then their mother revealed that she had something else connected to you, something she had never opened because it was addressed only to your soulmate. And unlike the old letter, this one had not been sitting hidden for years. It had arrived recently. Your soulmate forgot about leaving the hospital the moment they heard the word "recently." Their bag slipped from their hand and landed beside the bed, but they barely noticed. Until that second, everything they had discovered could still be placed safely in the past, painful, unfair, devastating, but old. A recent message changed that completely. It meant you had not become nothing more than a memory. It meant somewhere, somehow, the story might still be moving. Your soulmate stared at their mother and asked the only question that mattered. "How recent?" She hesitated before answering. "A few days before you came here." Your soulmate's eyes widened. "You had something from them before I was admitted to this hospital. And you never told me?" Their mother immediately explained that she had been afraid. After everything that had happened, she didn't know whether giving it to them would bring peace or destroy the fragile life they had built. But your soulmate shook their head. "That was never your decision to make." Their mother reached deeper into her bag and pulled out a second envelope. This one looked completely different from the first. It was clean, untouched, and sealed. Your soulmate recognized your name immediately, but beneath it was something that made their heart pound even harder: their own name. Both names were written together. For years, your soulmate had been told that whatever existed between the two of you belonged to another chapter of life. Yet here, inside a hospital room they had been preparing to leave, your names were sitting beside each other again. Their mother extended the envelope toward them and said quietly, "This belongs to you." It always did. Your soulmate took it, but their fingers remained on the sealed edge. Suddenly they were afraid to open it. Not because they didn't want the truth, but because after years of imagining what you might say if you ever had one more chance, the real answer was finally inches away. Their mother noticed and whispered, "You don't have to read it here." Your soulmate immediately replied, "Yes, I do. I spent too many years waiting for later." Then they opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small card containing one piece of information that made your soulmate sit back down immediately. It was a way to reach you. They stared at it without speaking. Their mother finally admitted that this was the real reason she had been so nervous when your soulmate demanded that promise. She knew helping them find you might not require months of searching. The possibility had already been placed in her hands. Your soulmate looked at the card again, then at their mother. So when I asked you to help me find them, you already knew this existed? She nodded. Your soulmate closed their eyes, overwhelmed by how close the truth had been while they had felt so far away from you. Then they began reading the letter. The first lines were enough to silence every question in the room. You had not written to demand anything. You had not asked your soulmate to abandon their life or make some dramatic choice. You had written because there was one truth you no longer wanted buried: what happened years ago was never the ending you wanted. You explained that there had been moments when you almost reached out, but you had been afraid that doing so would create more pain if your soulmate had genuinely moved forward. You didn't want to return merely to disturb their peace. But you also couldn't accept the possibility that they might spend the rest of their life believing you had stopped caring. Your soulmate had to stop reading. They turned toward the window, trying to control the emotion they had been holding back since the first envelope appeared. Their mother remained silent. She finally understood why your soulmate had refused to leave. This wasn't about chasing an old memory. It was about discovering that one of the deepest wounds in their life had been built around incomplete information. Your soulmate looked down at the letter again and whispered, "They thought I had moved on." Their mother answered softly, "Maybe everyone thought that." Your soulmate shook their head. "Everyone except me." That sentence changed the atmosphere completely. For the first time, their mother understood that all the years of silence had not erased what existed between you. Your soulmate had simply learned how to live around the unanswered questions. They had smiled when expected. They had attended family gatherings. They had allowed people to believe everything was fine. But some part of them had remained standing at the exact place where you disappeared from their life, still wondering what they had done wrong. Don't skip what came next, because this was where the promise their mother made was immediately tested. Your soulmate picked up their phone and placed the card beside it. Their mother realized what they were about to do. "You're contacting them now?" she asked. Your soulmate looked at her. "You promised." Their mother swallowed hard and nodded. "I did." For several seconds, your soulmate stared at the contact information. Their thumb hovered over the screen. After years of distance, the entire future seemed to have narrowed down to one decision: reach out, or walk away carrying another unanswered question. Your soulmate finally began typing. They erased the first message. Then the second. Then the third. Nothing sounded right. How could a few sentences explain years of misunderstanding? How could they say they had only just learned the truth? How could they ask whether you still wanted to hear from them without placing pressure on you? Finally, your soulmate stopped trying to write the perfect message. They typed something simple. They said they had received what you left for them. They said they now knew there were things neither of you had understood years ago. And they asked whether, when you were ready, the two of you could finally have the conversation that should have happened long before. Your soulmate read it once. Then pressed send. The message left the screen. Nothing happened. A minute passed. Then another. Their mother quietly picked up the hospital bag, but your soulmate still didn't move toward the door. They kept watching the phone. Eventually their mother said, "We should go. They may need time." Your soulmate nodded. This time they were willing to leave, because the promise had been made and the truth was finally moving forward. They walked out of that hospital room carrying the 2 letters with them, and for the first time in years, they weren't walking away from you. They were walking toward an answer. But before they reached the hospital exit, the phone vibrated. Your soulmate stopped instantly. Their mother turned around. A new message had appeared. Your soulmate looked at the screen, and all the color drained from their face, not because the message was cold, and not because you had told them never to contact you again. It was because the first words revealed something nobody in that family knew. You had been waiting for this message. And you had one final truth to tell them in person. Your soulmate stood completely still in the hospital hallway, reading your message again and again. Those few words carried more weight than everything they had discovered that day. You had been waiting. Not demanding, not chasing, not forcing your way back into their life, simply waiting for the truth to reach them. Their mother watched their expression and immediately understood that whatever was written on that screen had changed something. "What did they say?" she asked. Your soulmate didn't answer at first. They held the phone against their chest and looked toward the hospital doors, almost as if stepping outside would mark the beginning of an entirely different life. Finally, they whispered, they said, "There's something they need to tell me face to face." Their mother became nervous again. Your soulmate noticed immediately. After everything that had already been revealed, that reaction was impossible to ignore. "You know what this is about, don't you?" they asked. Their mother shook her head, but this time your soulmate wasn't willing to accept uncertainty as an answer. "You promised me no more secrets." Their mother took a long breath and reminded them that her promise was exactly why she had finally handed over both envelopes. She truly didn't know what you wanted to reveal now. But she admitted there was one possibility she had feared for years. There might have been another person involved in keeping the 2 of you apart, someone whose role had never been fully uncovered. Your soulmate looked down at your message again. Suddenly the old dates, the missing messages, the intercepted attempts to reconnect, and years of silence seemed connected by something larger. They had spent so long blaming circumstances, timing, and sometimes even themselves. Now they were beginning to understand that the separation had never been as simple as either of you believed. But instead of becoming angry, your soulmate made a surprisingly calm decision. "I don't want another family version of the story," they said. "I want to hear it from them." Their mother nodded. This time, she didn't argue. That mattered more than your soulmate expected. The promise made inside that hospital room was already changing the relationship between them. Their mother had spent years believing protection meant controlling which truths were allowed to surface. Now she finally understood that real protection sometimes meant standing aside and allowing someone to face the truth themselves. She reached for your soulmate's hand and said, "Whatever happens when you meet them, I won't interfere. If you decide you need answers, I'll respect that. If you decide you want them back in your life, I'll respect that too." Your soulmate looked at her with tears gathering in their eyes. That's the promise I needed. They finally walked through the hospital doors. Outside, everything looked exactly the same, the cars passing, people coming and going, the ordinary noise of another day. Yet for your soulmate, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Only hours earlier, they believed they were simply being discharged. Now they were leaving with proof that one of the most important stories of their life had never actually been finished. Your soulmate opened your message once more. Beneath those first emotional words was a question: "Can we meet somewhere quiet?" Their fingers trembled as they typed back, "Yes." Your response came much faster this time. You suggested a place connected to a memory only the two of you would understand. The moment your soulmate read it, their eyes filled with tears. Their mother asked what was wrong, but your soulmate smiled for the first time that day. "Nothing," they whispered. They remembered. That detail mattered. After all those years, you remembered. Don't skip what happened after that, because your soulmate could have gone home, rested, and delayed everything until another day. Instead, they asked their mother to take them directly to the meeting place. Their mother hesitated because they had only just left the hospital, but one look at their face told her there would be no changing their mind. This conversation had already been postponed for years. Neither of you needed another delay. During the drive, your soulmate barely spoke. They held your old note in one hand and their phone in the other. Memories returned in fragments. Conversations that ended too soon, plans that never happened, questions they had never been able to answer. But one thought kept returning stronger than all the others. What if you had spent those same years believing they were the one who stopped caring? When they finally arrived, your soulmate remained seated for several seconds. Their mother turned off the car and said, "I can come with you if you want." Your soulmate shook their head. "No. This part belongs to us." Their mother nodded and kept her promise. Your soulmate stepped out alone. At first they didn't see you. They walked slowly toward the place mentioned in your message, their heartbeat growing louder with every step. Then they stopped. You were there. For a moment, neither of you moved. Years of questions stood between you, but so did every memory that had survived those years. Your soulmate had imagined this moment countless times, yet now that it was real, none of the speeches they had rehearsed mattered. They simply looked at you and said, "I got your letter." You nodded. Then your soulmate said the words you had waited years to hear. "I know you didn't abandon me." Your expression changed instantly. That was when the distance between the two of you stopped feeling impossible. You told them you had never wanted them to carry that belief. You explained that after everything fell apart, you tried more than once to make sure the truth reached them. When nothing came back, you eventually believed they had chosen silence. Your soulmate shook their head immediately. I never saw those messages. I know that now, you replied. Those words made your soulmate freeze. Because they revealed something important. You had recently discovered exactly what happened to those missing messages. Your soulmate stepped closer and asked, "Who stopped them?" You looked toward the ground for a moment, as if even after all these years the answer was difficult to say aloud. Then you explained that you had found evidence showing someone had deliberately redirected information between the two of you. Not because they hated either of you, but because they believed your relationship would create a conflict the family was desperate to avoid. Your soulmate's eyes filled with tears. But before they could ask for the name, you stopped them. There's something more important than who did it, you said. You reached into your pocket and pulled out one final folded paper. Your soulmate stared at it. This is what I wanted to tell you in person. They slowly took it from your hand. And when they opened it, they realized the biggest revelation was not about the person who separated you. It was proof that years ago, when your soulmate believed you had already walked away, you had made one final attempt to choose them, and someone else had answered in their place. Your soulmate looked up at you, stunned. And then you finally told them exactly who had answered that message. Your soulmate could barely hold the paper steady. Their eyes moved from the old message to your face, then back again, as though their mind refused to accept what was directly in front of them. For years, they had remembered that exact period as the moment you chose silence. They remembered waiting for your response, checking their phone late at night, convincing themselves each morning that maybe you simply needed more time. Eventually, when nothing came, they accepted the explanation everyone around them kept repeating: you had made your choice. You had moved on. But the paper in their hands proved something entirely different. You had reached out. You had asked for one final conversation. And someone had responded as if they were your soulmate, telling you not to contact them again. Your soulmate looked at you and whispered, "Who sent this?" You hesitated, because you knew the answer would hurt in a way the other revelations had not. Then you finally told them the truth. It had come from someone close enough to have access to information neither of you expected anyone else to see. Someone who genuinely believed separating the two of you would prevent a much larger family conflict. They had convinced themselves they were protecting your soulmate's future. But in doing so, they had made a decision that belonged only to the two of you. Your soulmate closed their eyes. Suddenly, years of confusion began fitting together. The unanswered messages. The strange changes in family conversations. The way certain people became uncomfortable whenever your name appeared. The advice to move forward that always arrived before your soulmate had even decided they were ready. None of it felt accidental anymore. But your soulmate surprised you. They didn't immediately ask for revenge. They didn't demand to confront anyone that night. Instead, They folded the paper carefully and said, "I already lost enough years to someone else's decision. I'm not giving them another moment right now." Then they looked directly at you. "I want to know about us." Those words changed everything. You both sat down somewhere quiet, and for the first time there was no family member between you, no intercepted message, no assumption speaking on your behalf. Just two people finally comparing the stories they had been carrying separately. Your soulmate told you how they waited. You told them how you tried to reach them. They admitted there were nights when they nearly searched for you but stopped because they believed contacting you would disrespect the decision you had supposedly made. You admitted that you had done the same thing, afraid that reaching out again would reopen a door they had deliberately closed. The painful truth was almost impossible to accept. Both of you had been waiting for permission from someone who had never actually asked the other to leave. Your soulmate lowered their head and quietly said, "We could have had this conversation years ago." You answered, "Yes." There was no pretending that the lost time didn't matter. It did. Neither of you could recover those years, and neither of you wanted to turn the moment into some perfect fantasy where every wound disappeared instantly. Too much had happened. Both of you had changed. Trust would have to be rebuilt carefully, and the truth still had consequences that needed to be faced. But something important had finally been restored. Choice. For the first time in years, the decision about what happened next belonged to you and your soulmate. Your soulmate reached across the space between you and gently took your hand. "I don't know exactly what happens from here," they admitted. "But I know what I don't want anymore. I don't want someone else deciding whether you belong in my life." You squeezed their hand. Neither of you needed a dramatic promise about forever. Not yet. What mattered was simpler and more real. No more disappearing because of assumptions, no more letting other people carry messages between you, and no more allowing silence to answer questions that should be asked directly. Meanwhile, your soulmate's mother remained nearby, keeping the promise she had made inside that hospital room. She didn't interrupt. She didn't call repeatedly. She didn't send another family member to interfere. She waited. Eventually, your soulmate told you about that promise. They explained how they had refused to leave the hospital until their mother agreed to help uncover the truth and stop standing between the two of you. When you heard that, your eyes filled with emotion. You had spent years wondering whether your soulmate would ever fight for the right to hear your side of the story. Now you had your answer. But there was still one thing your soulmate needed to do. They needed to speak to their mother again. So before leaving, your soulmate asked whether you would come with them. Not to create an argument. Not to accuse anyone. They wanted their mother to hear the truth directly from both of you so that nothing could ever be rewritten again. You agreed. When the two of you approached the car together, their mother saw you and immediately covered her mouth. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. She had seen your name on envelopes. She had heard stories about you. She had watched your absence affect her child for years. But now you were standing directly in front of her. Your soulmate remained beside you. Their mother stepped forward with tears already running down her face and said something neither of you expected. "I owe both of you an apology." Your soulmate didn't answer. Their mother admitted that even though she had not sent the message that separated you, her silence afterward helped the misunderstanding survive. She had learned enough to question what happened, but fear convinced her that reopening the past would only cause more damage. Now she understood that silence had caused its own damage. Then she looked at you. "I made a promise today," she said, "and I intend to keep it." Your soulmate reached for your hand again. Their mother continued, "Whatever the two of you decide from this moment forward, it will be your decision. I will not stand between you." Those were the words your soulmate had refused to leave the hospital without hearing. But hearing them again while you were standing there made them even more powerful. Your soulmate looked at you, and for the first time there was no hidden letter waiting somewhere, no missing message controlling the story, and no family secret deciding what either of you was allowed to believe. There was only the truth. And then your soulmate smiled through their tears. "Can we start again?" they asked. You looked at them for a long moment before answering. "Not from the beginning," you said softly. "From the truth." And that was exactly what the two of you chose to do. Not erase the past. Not pretend the pain never happened. But finally build whatever came next without anyone else speaking for either of you. The hospital was supposed to be the place your soulmate simply walked out of that day. Instead, it became the place where they finally refused to walk away from you again. The days that followed were quieter than anyone expected, but that quiet was completely different from the silence that had separated you before. This time, nothing was being hidden. Your soulmate called when they said they would call. You answered when you were ready. Neither of you tried to force years of distance into one perfect conversation. Instead, you began with the smallest truths, the memories you had both misunderstood, the moments you had both replayed differently, and the choices you would have made if the messages between you had actually reached their destination. Every conversation revealed another missing piece, and with every piece your soulmate became more certain of one thing: what happened between you had never been a simple case of love disappearing. The connection had been buried beneath fear, assumptions, and decisions made by people who believed they knew what was best. Your soulmate's mother also kept her promise. Whenever another family member tried to ask questions or suggest that reopening the past was a mistake, she stopped them. "This belongs to them," she said. Those words surprised everyone because years earlier she might have been the first person to encourage caution. Now she had seen what that caution had cost. She refused to let the same mistake happen twice. More importantly, she began searching through old conversations, papers, and family records because she wanted to understand exactly how the false message had been sent and how long the misunderstanding had been protected. Then one evening, she found something. It wasn't another letter. It was an old record connected to the day your final message had been answered. When she showed it to your soulmate, they immediately called you. Their voice sounded different, not angry, but shaken. They asked whether you remembered exactly when you received the response telling you never to contact them again. You remembered. That moment had been impossible to forget. Your soulmate compared your memory with the record their mother had discovered, and suddenly there was no longer any doubt about where the response had originated. The person responsible had been much closer to the situation than either of you realized. Your soulmate could have confronted them immediately, but instead they asked you what you wanted. That question mattered because years ago nobody had asked. Decisions had simply been made around both of you. Now your soulmate refused to repeat that pattern, even while trying to repair the damage. You thought about it carefully and said, "I don't need revenge. I need them to admit what they did." Your soulmate agreed. A family conversation was arranged. When the person finally arrived, they had no idea that you would also be there. The moment they saw you sitting beside your soulmate, their expression changed. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. Your soulmate placed the old record and the copied message on the table and asked one question. "Did you answer this pretending to be me?" The person looked at the evidence. Then at you. Then at your soulmate's mother. For several painful seconds, they said nothing. Your soulmate remained calm. "I spent years believing someone I loved had walked away from me. They spent years believing I had rejected them. If you had anything to do with that, this is your opportunity to tell us yourself." Finally, the person admitted it. They confessed that at the time, tensions inside the family had become intense. Certain relatives believed your relationship would force your soulmate to choose between love and family expectations. The person responsible became convinced that if the two of you spoke again, your soulmate would choose you, and they were afraid of what that choice would do to the family. So when the opportunity appeared, they sent the response themselves, believing one painful ending would prevent years of conflict. Your soulmate stared at them in disbelief. "You stole the choice from both of us." The person began apologizing, insisting they had believed they were protecting everyone. But your soulmate shook their head. Protection without truth is control. The room went silent. Their mother looked down because those words affected her too. She had not sent the message, but she understood how easily fear could disguise itself as protection. That was exactly why she had made her promise at the hospital. Never again would she decide what truth her child was strong enough to hear. The person turned toward you and apologized. You listened without interrupting. When they finished, you didn't offer instant forgiveness. You simply said, "I needed the truth more than I needed an apology." Your soulmate reached for your hand beneath the table. For years, the identity of the person responsible had seemed like the biggest unanswered question. But once the confession finally happened, something surprising became clear. Knowing the name didn't magically repair everything. What mattered was that the lie no longer had power over either of you. That night, after everyone left, you and your soulmate sat together again. No envelopes. No evidence. No family members. Just the two of you. Your soulmate looked at you and asked a question that carried none of the desperation of the past. What do you want now? You thought about everything that had happened. The years apart. The hospital. The letters. The message. The confession. You could have answered with a promise about forever, but instead you chose something more meaningful. I want us to stop living according to what should have happened and find out what can happen now. Your soulmate smiled. That's what I want too. From that point, the two of you began rebuilding slowly. There were difficult conversations. There were moments when old pain resurfaced unexpectedly. Sometimes one of you needed space. Sometimes the other needed reassurance. But now there was one rule neither of you broke: ask before assuming. If something hurt, you talked about it. If something felt uncertain, your soulmate asked. If family pressure appeared, both of you faced it together instead of allowing someone else to carry messages between you. Weeks later, your soulmate had one final follow-up appointment at the same hospital. Their mother came with them. And so did you. When the appointment ended, your soulmate walked past the room where everything had changed. They stopped for a moment and looked through the doorway. Their mother stood beside them, remembering the day her child refused to leave until she made one promise about you. Your soulmate smiled and said, "Do you remember what you promised me here?" Their mother nodded. "I remember." Then she looked at you. "And I'm still keeping it." Your soulmate took your hand and continued toward the exit. This time nobody had to convince them to leave the hospital. There was no hidden envelope waiting to be discovered, no unanswered message holding them back, and no secret standing between the two of you. They walked through those doors beside you. And perhaps that was the most powerful part of everything that had happened. Your soulmate had originally refused to leave because they needed one promise from their mother. But in the end, the promise that changed everything was the one you and your soulmate quietly made to each other. Never again would silence be allowed to decide your story.